That was possibly the perfect segue to this panel, Matt, connecting with community, the community being customers, city folk, but also how this industry, the farming and agricultural industry, does that in the face of certain challenges like activist groups, for example, and all sorts of things. But we will get stuck into that over the next half hour or so. First of all, rather than me bang on and introduce you all like I have been, I want you guys to introduce yourselves. So, Kay Hull, why don't we start with you? I think we are.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Liz. Kay Hull. I am a medium enterprise business owner-operator for about 45 years. I've been an MP in the federal parliament. I'm a country born and bred girl. What energises me now is being the chair of AgriFutures Australia. I think that is the most energising action that I've got in my life at the moment.
And just explain to us what AgriFutures do.
AgriFutures Australia is formerly called Rural Industries Research Development Corporation, RURDIC. It has 13 industries and that don't have their own organisations, such as MLA or Wool Innovation, etc. And those industries are a variety of maturity of industries. They go from multi-million-dollar industries such as chicken meat, thoroughbred horses, etc., down through the chain to less mature industries but valuable industries. You have ginger, tea tree, a whole host of kangaroo, ratite. We have 13 industries that, as I said, range in a variety of maturity.
Great, and of course many of you will know that Kay also represented the Riverina for 12 years, was it, in federal parliament?
Yeah, it
but
was.
That's not necessarily the focus today. Hannah Greenshields and Tim Eyes, welcome guys, it's fantastic to have you here. Hannah, do you want to explain what you guys are up to?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, and I just wanted to say what an honour it is to be here as a young farmer. Thank you so much for spending your time here to really invest into our future. So I just wanted to start with that. But so Tim and I, we're first-generation farmers. We produce beef cattle, pasture-raised chickens, pasture-raised eggs on the central coast of New South Wales. So we are 1 hour north of Sydney, 1 hour from 6 million people. We sell our produce straight to our consumers. So we sell New South Wales-wide with our online deliveries, and then we also sell at markets every week.
And Tim, you're not necessarily, well, you don't come from a farming background, as Hannah mentioned. What were you doing beforehand?
I've wanted to be a farmer. I say this quite often since I could run around the backyard naked with an egg in my hand. There's just nothing like the visceral connection we have to land, and yeah, I just couldn't think of anything else. There was no plan B for me but to be a farmer. I did study a fairly conventional path in agriculture, and I became myself incredibly disconnected from the hard work I did as I gave the responsibility of the animals I raised to someone else. And so that's what's led us into where we are now.
Remind me where you grew up?
On the Central Coast.
Yep.
So stayed where we are, and where I grew up, and then we've just transitioned into this regenerative and holistic mindset. We've heard that holistic mindset in so many aspects this afternoon, and how important that is, I guess, for us to be good custodians of the land, but also to ourselves.
And you guys are now obviously running the food farm. I'd encourage anyone, just whip out your phones and check that out online. It's a beautiful website, by the way. So paddock to plate business, getting beef, chicken, eggs to hundreds of consumers. Matt, had you heard of the food farm? Had you heard of the food farm before? If you
no, I haven't, but I just nodded to my EA over there and said, as in write it bloody down. Are you having as many problems as I am with my chooks at the moment? My chooks decided to stop laying because it got a bit cold last week. I bought a few more too, and I threw them in with them, and they just stopped overnight. I'm like, guys, I need some eggs for the schnitties.
Right, we'll skip past you on the bio front, Matt, because I know I stole that from you before. Fiona, I know we all know you are obviously the president of the NFF, but you run a very productive farming enterprise. Tell us about that.
Yep, certainly do. Liverpool Plains, generational, multi-generational farm. So Matt and I were just sort of musing over there briefly at the thought of succession planning, which is going on absolutely on our farm, and really excited to be handing over to a very passionate son and daughter-in-law who absolutely wants to seize the opportunities that are being created by people wanting to see where their food comes from. And so on the Liverpool Plains, which is where it is, we grow crops and cattle, and Claire Lee is with me here, at the conference as well. We piloted an agritourism pilot in our region where we had a sunflower trail for the first time this year, started opening up our farms to people who wanted to see where their food came from. Absolutely amazed at the interest in what we do and how we do it. And we had people coming to the Liverpool Plains from all over, and just loved telling the story of farming, telling the story of our farm, helping people forage flowers in the paddock to make into wreaths, looking at sunflowers and experimenting with the ways that we eat them and grow them. And so passions for me, absolutely the farm, my family, 2 new grandchildren, and also the wonderful thing that is regional Australia and agriculture all entwined into one, and do anything I can in that space.
So the NFF have some interesting stats that Loretta pulled out for me earlier, and forgive me if some of you have heard these, but I found them really interesting. The NFF's research shows that 68% of Australians trust agriculture and farmers, but on the flip side, 34% of Australians report feeling connected to agriculture. Fiona, 34%, how do we feel about that?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important stat. Lucy, and I think it's important for a couple of things. And one is Robbie mentioned the Telling Our Story project, which is a project that Matt sits on the trust for, as do I, as do Robbie. We have a couple of others as well. And that's a project that we are really connecting with the community again to reach that, not just that 34%, let me tell you, but the much bigger percentage of people who are not connected with where their food comes from anymore and want to be connected. But I think too, the 34%, it's not the people, and sometimes in agriculture we're a bit siloed, and we talk to people who know what we're talking about all the time. We're talking to the people on our social media pages who know who we are. We sort of operate in silos, and sometimes we think that people in urban communities don't like farmers and hate farmers and have these strong feelings against farmers. I think what that tells me is that there's a lot of people out there, and this is what came through in the research, that just don't really know farmers. They don't know who we are anymore. They don't have cousins who live on the farms like they did in the old days. We're a much more diverse population now and highly urbanised. People have got multiple generations of family who've only ever lived in the city, yet they still, so it's not that they don't like farmers, it's just, and that we're one of the most highly trusted industries, it's just that they don't know us anymore, and they have this real yearning to know where their food comes from, who's making it, who's growing it, and to follow that through. So it's a huge opportunity for us as we reach out to the community to tell them more about what we do by opening our farms and talking about what we do.
Which raises this question of the social licence. So as part of this panel, we are going to be talking about how you keep doing all those things, farming and doing all you want to do in the face of some of the challenges that you might come up against when community perceptions of what you're doing on farm maybe are misguided. Kay, this idea of social licence, what does it mean to you, and when did you first start hearing about it?
Well, I guess we've been doing research, collaborative research with all the 15 RDCs, Regional Development, Research Development Corporations, and they've been collaborating on trying to understand some of the challenges that confront all of the industries right across the board in rural industry. And we found out, we did a 2-year survey. The first year we had about 5,500 participants, mostly from city, across the board, but mostly from the city area. areas. The second year was over 8,700 participants. And we found in there that the, trust is generally high. Community trust is high in agriculture. But they wanted us to understand that they needed their voices heard. And food is particularly important, as we've heard Matt. We've heard everybody today talking about the importance of food. People want to know the provenance of food. They want to know, the supply chain, the resilience of the workers, and that they're being respected, etc. So social licence in many areas of animal welfare have come into play. And so I think it is a big thing. We've got a lot of choosy customers now. They're pretty well cashed up. Many of the customers that are wanting to understand how this all works, and we determined that the questions we asked is, well, what does it mean to you? They wanted environmental responsibility. They wanted us to respond to animal welfare. That was a driver of trust for them. Food safety was at the top of their mind. As I said, the provenance, supply chain, etc. But they did value that high quality of produce that Matt's talking about, and that we're known all over the world for the high quality of our produce. In fact, we're known probably more internationally for that high quality than we are right here in the nation. So I guess social licence has become one of the big things we as AgriFutures have had to look at and collaborate with our industries in the thoroughbred industry, kangaroo industry, those industries that, that have significant issues with animal welfare. And I think that what we've seen and what we've witnessed is the absolute attention and dedication to ensuring animal welfare. And I think the floods have just recently demonstrated that. The love that farmers had for their animals, swimming out, trying to save their cattle, like heartbroken, trying to rescue. I think we've seen that demonstrated, and that's been played out a lot in media. And I think perhaps there's a better understanding and awakening in the Australian people of that.
Tim, you love your animals?
Sure do. Following on from that, and also what Matt said before about, I get frustrated myself that we wait for a natural disaster to show people that we care. Farmers cry on shows in the middle of the drought when they're at despair, and we need to be more vulnerable to truly open this connection as farmers. We have such a huge responsibility on our hands. We have been given this task of raising these animals and then taking their lives, and we do it responsibly, but we also need to show how much that sits with us, and we need to do it before it's a disaster.
How do you do that at home?
Well, for us, it's about our social media connection. Getting people on the farm is the big thing, getting their hands dirty. It's about telling the bad stories, the really difficult conversations. The panel before us had a difficult conversation, and this whole room has changed. It created trust. And so when we get online, when we get our phones out of our pockets and we use them to the best of their ability to tell the hard stories, to say how tough it is, to have the responsibility to take these lives and to give them the best possible life we can, that's our absolute responsibility of custodians of these lives and the land. And we need to all be doing it, because the problem is someone else will tell our story for us, and they will shout it from the rooftops if we don't.
Can I just say, Lucy, because I think that's a really, really important point. And up till about a decade ago particularly, farmers were really absent in this space of telling our story and talking to the community about what we do. We're by nature, Australian agriculture is mostly small family farms, and we're very busy on our farms, and we're very busy doing what we do. And it's really easy, because we love it, and then it's very easy to be just busy doing what you're doing and forgetting about this need to keep building the connections with the community and your consumers and the people who eat what we produce and use the fibre that we grow. And so up until about a decade ago, we were really, really bad at it. And I have to say, from an industry advocacy point of view now, I'm really excited that there's a lot of initiatives both at the school level, and we see a lot of farmers going into classrooms, projects now aimed at curriculums, as well as now at this level where farmers themselves are feeling empowered to feel, to show emotion, to feel, to share their stories. And we're coming up with different initiatives that are allowing people to feel comfortable and uncomfortable about sharing, but sharing in a way that is meaningful.
And particularly Tim and Hannah, how old are you guys, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 27.
You can say it.
And Tim's almost 30.
I think there's a great opportunity at the moment. You only have to look at what's happened in the last couple of years with people not travelling and so many city folk getting into regional tourism. Like it's, people want to know more about what's going on out there, and there's been an absolute boom. Like, you're trying to go to any regional hub in New South Wales on a weekend and get accommodation, you just can't. And that's all city folk sort of travelling around and seeing what's going on. So there's a great opportunity just in that, getting people out into those areas and meeting farmers and doing different things. Just in the last month or so with, owning the pub and meeting, I've met more farmers in the region in the last 3 weeks than I have in 20 years of owning it. Neighbours I didn't even know that existed. And
would you have done any of that if COVID hadn't happened, do you think?
What's that, sorry?
Would any of that happen for you if COVID hadn't happened?
Would I have bought the pub if COVID didn't happen? I don't know. That's a very good question. Yeah, I probably would have, because, that's where I was leading to. I wanted to spend more time on the farm. I just had to get rid of Dad in the nicest possible way.
Sorry, Liz, can I just follow on from what Fiona said about farmers being absent in the past? And I think that's a really key point, because the question I would ask, do we take responsibility for more of the negative than we should? I do think we take responsibility for more of the negative than we should. We have a great story to tell. You've heard so many great stories here over the 2 days. Today you heard Stuart with a massive story, but we're not good at telling stories. Maybe what we are good at is taking responsibility for what we really should not have to all the time.
Well, perfect segue into another stat from the NFF. Thanks, Fiona. Only 21% of Australians strongly agree that farmers are focused on improving their environmental performance. That's quite a staggering one, wouldn't you say?
That's a staggering one, and again, I think that really tells a story about our past performance in the space.
You're referring to LiveX, those kind of...
Well, and also the whole discussion about climate change. Last time round we had it, when agriculture wasn't ready for the discussion, agriculture wasn't partaking in the discussion, agriculture really put its head in the sand. And with due respect to all the agricultural leaders at the time, because I know it's not always easy, but this time round, we've been, so that actually showed us the work we have to do. Because, most, as I said earlier, farmers are farmers because they love doing what they do. Tim said, farmers love animals. I had a great discussion with some people here from the RSPCA who's been here with us over the last 2 days about how much farmers love animals. Farmers love the environment. We work with it all the time. Farmers love soils. Farmers are interested in soils. Farmers are, but they don't tell the story of that enough. And unless we get that message out there, Lucy, then, we risk the community having this wrong image of farmers.
One thing I have to say I've observed when I've been out doing stories for the ABC is this sort of image that we portray as a typical farm. I don't know who we point the finger at that over for and whether it's a problem or not, but I'm just putting it out there for you guys to throw around, because some farms you see rolling hills, fat dairy cows, they're lush and green. Others are flat, dry, there's a whole lot of stubble. I think a lot of people from cities would be quite sort of shocked by that image. We all know that that's potentially a really productive farm, but it doesn't look super sexy or necessarily always a desirable place to live. What do you guys think about that?
Well, can I just say, Liz, again, on the back of that conversation, we were doing that when we were doing the research, and I was listening in on the research on community trust. I heard all the questions about what we should be doing, what farmers should be doing, what producers should be doing, but there was no question, and there was a question on, how should farmers and producers sustain the environment. But there was never a question in that research as to, is it everybody's business to sustain the environment? So why do we constantly make the point that it seems to be only rural industries that have to sustain the environment? In my understanding, in my view, environmental responsibility and management is not just up to rural industries, it's up to the nation. And we all play a part in that. And so I think we keep perpetuating this thing. We've got multi-storey buildings with air conditioning 24/7 that's got no windows, and we've got all of these planning controls that are not being adopted and adaptive to renewable energies and providing, environmental sustainability opportunities. Yet it is always the question that we put on ourselves, what should we be doing more, when in fact what Fiona's saying is absolutely right. The farmers love their land because that's their business. That's how they sustain their business. They don't abuse the land. And so I think, again, we are too on the back foot at accepting responsibility for things that perhaps the nation should be playing a part in.
Tim, you're looking a bit itchy over there.
I am. I wear it on my face, definitely. I think we're the custodians of over 50% of our land mass. It is absolutely our responsibility. That unfortunately the people in skyscrapers cannot look after our farm, our landscapes. They are doing other jobs. They are keeping the world spinning in their own way. So I think we absolutely need to step up. It's our opportunity and it's exciting.
Can I say one thing, Luz, because I want to come back to your original question about the media and the photos and the stock photos. So at NFF, one of the reasons we wanted to get telling our story going was to give the media a whole lot of other options around what farmers look like. Because you don't see a lot of photos of people that look like Matt. You don't see a lot of photos of people...
What are you saying? Just because I got white shoes on doesn't mean I'm not a farmer.
You certainly don't see a lot of photos of people that look like me. But we have tried to make sure that there's, some really great variety and diversity in the photographs we use. But the other thing that's so important, Luce, is having great journalists like the ABC Rural team, and kudos to you. And this is something that we really noticed during COVID. So during COVID, the city journalists couldn't travel. And so ABC and other networks had to use their country journalists. And we've noticed a huge difference in some of the reporting of the stories, because we're actually having now people actually telling the stories about communities that they know and people that they know and issues that they know intimately, rather than jetting in from somewhere they don't. So yes, so that's a bit to Kay's point about how important it is. Are we not always the best storytellers? No, we're not. Sometimes it's great to hear it from us and people like Hannah and Tim, particularly on, just telling their own story, but we also depend on the storytellers and make sure that you've got the right information to tell the story.
Yeah, we've all got a role to play. I love this question from Owen Atkin. Thank you, Owen. Something I really wanted to come to is the issue of social licence something that applies to both well-off and poorer consumers, or is it primarily an issue for wealthy consumers? And I guess, Hannah and Tim, what you're doing, correct me if I'm wrong, and Matt as well, the price point for your produce, for example, might be higher than what many Australians can actually afford. So is this conversation a bit privileged that we're having?
It's such a good question, and something I ponder a lot. I think we're definitely seeing, even like at all levels, people are wanting to connect with their food somehow, and we see that every week at the markets, and it's from all demographics. So people are happy to count out their last dollars to buy a small amount of meat, but what it does is it really matches their values. I think we see organics, it's growing every single year. So people are looking for something that does match their value set, no matter how much they do earn. But you're right, it is a privileged conversation and something that we definitely do need to consider.
It's interesting, you know, obviously seeing both sides of the, you know, the farming and delivering it to customers. I'm talking a lot about the country pub because it's something very new to me and I'm learning as I'm going. But, you know, I priced it accordingly as what I would always do in Sydney. But I think the difference that I found, what I was doing compared to, and I don't mean to badmouth any other pubs, but what every other pub was doing in the region was, you know, it was the ING fish and chips out of the thing and straight in the deep fryer, the snitty stayed out of the freezer into the deep fryer. And when I actually put the menu up on social media, you know, there was backlash. There was a lot of backlash. You know, you're charging $2-3 more for a chicken snitty than, you know, my local pub. And it really quickly identified what I had to do is actually start getting photos of what I was actually producing on social media platforms so they actually knew that it wasn't. You know, like for instance, the chicken snitty that we're serving at Rockley is half a chicken off the bone, boned out and, you know, crumbed and done to order, and it's that thick. It's 440 grams of chicken. And most chicken snitties are like that. So I had to get social media out there straight away so people would just notice what I was actually trying to do. And, you know, I copped a bit of flack for the pricing, but, you know, at the same time, it's a very different product to what other people were getting. So going back to the growers markets and the farmers markets, people actually coming in and seeing what they're buying and getting, you know, I think people are prepared to probably pay that little bit more to satisfy themselves.
But does that come down to social licence, a question again? I think no matter your wealth, no matter what you buy in your supermarket or your local shop, I think we've got to listen to every customer, because they want us to be responsive to animal well-being, they want us to be responsible growers, they want a responsible world, and we're seeing that in our children coming forward. You know, our children coming forward are very dynamically engaged in their environment. With my grandkids, are very dynamically engaged, and I think I think we've got to listen and seen to be acting responsibly and responding to those community concerns. And I think we do very well, but we can always do better and continue.
Another great question from the floor. Fleur Anderson has pointed out that stat about the trust in farmers. Was it 34% feel connected, and then what was it, 68% trust? Can't remember. Yep. The positive there, or the interesting thing she's saying, is that whilst it's high, it has declined in the last few years. It's a negative, isn't it? What does the panel think that the drivers of that decline actually are? Fiona, why don't you tackle that one first?
I actually thought the trust stats had gone up. So I'm not sure whether we're misinterpreting.
Let me double check. Okay, so we've got...
I think the trust is showing... Yeah, no, Loretta's nodding. So what I think So one of the things that... So I think 34% are not connected, feel that they're not connected to farming. That's that stat. So when you ask people, you know, what do you know about farmers, 34% say, really, we don't know anything, which shows to me what a great opportunity we've got. There's a whole third of the community out there who aren't connected. But the research that we've done since we started telling our story, so we really wanted to make sure that if we were going to start telling people's story and start, you know, talking to people, the consumers, that it made a difference. We could pick up whether what we were doing was working or whether it wasn't. And so the trust is actually going up very slowly, and I think COVID actually had a bit to play with that. So suddenly people were interested in making sure that their food was still on the table. We took the opportunity of putting a lot of billboards up, and because there wasn't a lot of people driving around, but ads and billboards, and Qantas took our ads on as well to remind people that farmers were still there doing the job. But, you know, and I'd love to think that that played just a small amount, but I think people then also, they got into the kitchens again over COVID. Like Matt moved back to Rockley, but everybody, I mean, I did the best fruit sourdough, I can't tell you, it's just the most magnificent sourdough bread. But everybody was in there doing slow cooks.
Everyone made sourdough.
It's so good though, my fruit sourdough.
I remember, this is the first Friday night we went into lockdown. I had, about 10 mates that I trained with, girls and guys, and one of them, we had a group thing and talking about how horrible it was all going to be and whatever else. And one of them said, "Hey, Maddie, why don't you on Friday night do a Zoom cooking class for us? And I said, yeah, sure. So, everyone's had a drink Friday night, everyone's logged in, and I told them to go and get some ingredients. 2 things I learnt. The first one is my friends that aren't chefs can't cook to save themselves. And the second one was, geez, there's something in this. And we've probably done 50 corporate Zooms over corporate at home, from 10 people to 400 people. Everyone was cooking in their kitchen. Of course, they couldn't go out. I was cooking every day and videoing it. My camera person was my 16-year-old daughter, and I was having a ball, actually. I quite enjoyed, look, apart from the devastation of, putting off 1,000 staff, actually sitting at home and cooking was a bit of the highlight, and having, my family around. I loved it, I could have done it for a couple more months, to be honest.
Tim and Hannah, I wonder what the best strategy is that you've found that has helped you really connect with your customers and your consumers. So a strategy that people in this room who are going home to their farms might be able to take away and use themselves.
I think it comes down to transparency. It's very hard to, as Stuart found, it's very hard to trust carbon that's a metre under the ground that you've never seen before. And so it's very hard to trust something you're not seeing. We actually replicated that those numbers last night, and we got the same result from our social media, so 68 and 34. And so very interesting to run it through our people.
Yeah, and we actually asked them what they need from Australian farmers to actually trust them. And the biggest themes that came through were transparency. They didn't feel that we were being as transparent as we could be on a whole lot of issues. Animal welfare, they said they wanted more transparency with chemical usage, and not that it's a bad thing, but just to understand how it was farmed, and water and environmental issues. So they were the main themes that came up.
That's interesting. So not necessarily raging against it, but just wanting to know more about it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And that's a theme that we find often the regenerative agriculture movement, it's pitted against, I guess, the conventional agriculture, but what it's about is actually seeing all the tools available to us and what suits that landscape and that enterprise the best. And that's really what we're about communicating.
I think what's exciting is the amount of research being done on this. We're all into it, we're all doing this, so I think it goes to show that we are interested, we want to know, we want to respond to the consumer, we want to ensure we have their trust, and we're all doing individual researches here, pretty much getting the same results, but it goes to show the commitment and the dedication of the rural industries in getting this right. They are interested, they are dedicated, they are engaged.
We are out of time, I believe, but just to round things off, in fact, I've only got one more question, and it's in the spirit of transparency. It's for Matt Moran. I just want to know, are you going home to cook your own dinner tonight? And if so, what are you cooking?
That's a very good question. As I left this morning, my wife said, will you be home to cook dinner tonight? And the transparency, yes, I am. What I'm going to cook, I have no idea. I actually do have a little bit of beef that I bought the other day that's still sitting in there. I'm lucky enough, I've got a pretty big, commercial kitchen at home, and I've got a cool room, so there's lots in it. So I'm not 100% sure, but I know that I land at 5:40, I think it is, and it gives me enough time to go and grab something to get home, and I'm only 15, 20 minutes from the airport. But yeah, look, people think that, because I'm a fine dining chef, well, I have been most of my life, and I've got these fancy restaurants, that's the sort of food that I cook at home all the time, which is actually not. It's not uncommon for me to have a boiled egg on toast on a Sunday night. And if anyone looks at my Instagram, they'll see that I'm actually always cooking at home. I love cooking. It's what I'm born to do. So,
as long as it's today's egg.
As long as it's today's egg.
Fiona might sort you out with some sourdough. Ladies and gentlemen, would you thank our fantastic panel? Thank you so much, guys.